everyone, Renee Tucci, AIFD here. I wanted to design a beautiful late winter, early spring design for you here today. And so let's get started. I actually am working with this 6x6 whitewash wooden cube box. And I really love this style container for this time of year. I think it lends itself into sort of a fresh look, so it's perfect for right now. What I've done to this, just as a pre-treatment to kick it up a notch, is I've actually taken some white yarn and I have crisscross wrapped it around all four sides, top and bottom, and created a really comfy, cozy sort of weave on all the sides and the top. Now the benefit of doing it around the top also is that it will additionally act like a grid to help us hold our flowers in place. This may not look like it from where you are, but this is a rather large container that holds a lot of flowers. And so sometimes large containers can be a little unruly and want to kind of let the flowers move as they will. And we need to make sure they stay where we want them. So the yarn is both a decorative element and a functional element. So I've got a lot of materials here to work with today, and I wanted to go with an unusual color palette. So I'm actually working in whites and brown. And I'm going, well, with a touch of green, of course. And I'm going to start with just a little bit of greenery. This is my Israeli Ruscus, or also known as Florida Ruscus. It's a very easy to get foliage. And I'm going to cut this up into smaller bits. Any areas of the stem that might go into the water should be cleared of all extra leaves so that we have completely clean stems that are going into the water. And where I dissected that stem, this little tuft is still perfect. It's long enough to go into the vase, so I'm going to add that in as well. Anytime I can get multiple placements out of one stem, that's a bonus. Okay, so we'll take this. And so I'm just adding a little bit of greenery all around, and this will additionally help us hold our fresh floral elements in place. So not only do we have the yarn acting as a grid, but the Ruscus will help us hold our stems in place as well. So you really need to have a nice firm base, a web, to hold your flowers in place before you get started. So next up, I'm going to add, I'm happy with this, and so I'm going to add some white lilies. These can be a challenge to work with because every stem is different, and they have these beautiful big open blooms down low, and then some taller buds that sometimes open, sometimes they don't. And if you're trying to work with all of that within a design like this, it can make your design look out of proportion. Because you're trying to see this big bloom, which causes these buds to be even taller than they need to be. So I'd encourage you actually to maybe edit your stems. And so how I dissected my Ruscus is how I'm actually going to dissect this stem as well. I am going to cut this. If I trace from the top down back to where these two buds meet the main stem, where this lily shoot comes off, I'm going to cut right above that. And so now I've got my lily bloom using the benefit of the main stem, so I've got a lot of length I can work with here. And then I have the buds on their own stem, and they are long enough to work with in this design as well. So I'll start with the open bloom, and I'm going to add him in right over here, just like that. And then I'm going to pair the buds back with the bloom, just like this. Let's do another one. Now this one, the buds are much closer to the open bloom, so I'm actually going to leave that as one. And I'm just going to cut my stem, a nice sharp angle cut, and I'm going to add this in very close to my first lily, because I'd like this design to be more of a grouped look. Now we'll move on to our next lily, and I'd like to dissect this as well. So we'll cut that there. again, we have this big white lily here, and we'll add that in just like that. So we've got a really nice selection of the white lily over here. I may go back and add some of these buds in later, but for right now I'm going to focus on the open blooms. So next up, I'm going to be adding in some sunflowers. Now, I know I told you I was making a white and brown design, and sunflowers don't fit with that, but I actually happen to have some sunflowers that are a little, they're not opening like I'd like them to, which happens from time to time, right? Mother Nature has a mind of her own. So I'm actually going to just discard the yellow petals and use the brown centers. The easiest way to discard petals from a sunflower is to not to pluck them straight out. That works sometimes, but you'll often see remnants of the petals. Sometimes it doesn't pluck out cleanly and you'll just see a little ripped piece that's left behind. But if you simply bend the petals back just like that, it pops them out of the sunflower head, sort of releases them. And it's very quickly, it's a very quick he loves me not situation. And just like that, you've got a completely clean sunflower head. So I'm going to cut my stems, and these are very heavy stem. So I want to make sure that I get this a good spot in my yarn web that I have created. And I'm going to let it be a little lower. That's okay by me. I've got several of them that I'm going to add in here, and I'm going to cluster them together just like I did with the lilies. Okay. And so I'm creating sort of multiple focal points here, clusters. All right. So now we have a nice selection of our naked, we'll call them naked sunflowers, right there. Okay, next up we're going to add some beautiful garden spirea. And this has a gorgeous overarching line to it. And it's going to help fill in between our focal areas. This is just so perfect right now this time of year. Look at that. Look at that. From the, I'm in the Northeast and it's coming up just perfectly now in the middle of May. I had to showcase it. So I'm actually going to stick that into the center area and let it just arch out and cascade out. Got a few more pieces here. I'm going to add some to the back. Now you'll notice whenever I cut my stems, I'm stripping the remnants from the bottom of the stem. You should have a completely clean stem when it goes into your vase. Okay. Now, one of the other things that I wanted to include in this design was actually some magnolia leaves. Now, I know they tend to be more of a late in the year seasonal flower. They're often used in holiday designs, but I love them and I use them all year round. I actually have some dried magnolia leaves. So these were fresh and I let them dry. You can kind of hear it. They're very dry. And I took my dried magnolia leaves and I got my needle and thread out and I actually sewed a pattern onto my magnolia leaf. So I did a little bit of a different pattern on each leaf. It's just a few lines, but it creates a really fun geometric pattern. And additionally, when I was wrapping the cube with the yarn, on two of the sides, I actually wove some of the dried magnolia leaves into the yarn to give it a little more unity between what's happening up here in the design and the container itself. So I've taken these leaves and I have wired them onto a wood pick. I've just given them a little bit of a leg here, and I can just add these right into my design. still in cluster form, like we were in groupings form, like we did with our lily and our sunflower. But you can see how really fun and unexpected that is. And it brings some real drama to the design. Okay, next up, we have some roses that we're going to add to our fourth quadrant. So far we have our lilies in one quadrant, we have our naked sunflowers in another, we have our magnolia leaves, and we're going to add these beautiful Earl Grey roses. So these, I want to see if I can open them any further. So I'm going to use my favorite tool, which is my hot air. Just by blowing on them a little bit, you can sometimes get roses to open and be a little more full and impactful. And so I'm going to add these in the fourth quadrant group as well. Now, any of my petals that are not so hot, I'm going to pluck off, and that's completely fine. Roses actually come with a layer of petals on the outside called guard petals, and they're meant to take the beating and shipping. And so they may come like this one, a little bit torn, or a little ripped or marked. You can just simply pluck those off. When you pluck them, you should hear a sort of a crispy crack, and that's how you know you've got a nice fresh rose. And you want to make sure that you get the full petal off. You know how we talked about the remnant of a sunflower petal? You can also have remnants of a rose petal. If you're not careful when you pull it off, now these are so fresh, they're pulling off completely here for me, but if you're not careful, you can actually end up with just a ripped petal, and that doesn't look pretty. So we want to make sure that we completely remove our petals. All right, and I am adding these in groups, as I mentioned. Any chance I can get to have a rose be a little more showy, even if it means making myself a little bit dizzy. I'm a little dizzy anyway, aren't we? Aren't we all? Okay, I love this Earl Grey rose. It's got a tiny, tiny touch of lavender to it, or gray. So it goes perfectly with this color palette. All right, here's our last rose. How beautiful is that? Okay. Let me clear my workspace off here a little bit. Our last element that we're going to add to this design is going to be our chocolate cosmos. So I actually work with a local flower farm, and they grew these. I just picked them up today, and aren't they just so luscious? They're the perfect dramatic complement to this white or gray palette, if you will. So I'm going to add these in right around my roses and my lilies. Of course, I can go back and add some more of the magnolia leaves on the other sides of the cube. And it's very easy just to weave them into the yarn. Super fast, but really shows that you're paying attention to the details. So that's why I love to do that. Little details like that really make a difference in a design. So again, I'm doing the cosmos in a cluster. Let's see if we can get it in here. There we go. Now it's a small flower, so it really benefits from being grouped together. And there we go. Okay. So that, my friends, is our white and brown clustered floral design. I hope you enjoy it. I hope you've been inspired. And I hope you bloom on. Thanks, everyone.